You're tuned into 9 to 5 Work Rebels with your host, Ebony Gale.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Gems in Comms series special brought to you by 9 to 5 Work Rebels podcast in association with Hanson Search, the award-winning international exec search consultancy. So I am your host, Ebony Gale, and today I am really excited to be speaking with a colleague of mine that is Ngozi Emeagi, Director of Communications for Data Analytics at the London Stock Exchange Group, LSEG, also known as. So welcome, Ngozi.
Hello, lovely to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here, Sue. So for those who are watching, I know Ngozi from being on the Women in PR committee. So I was on the committee when she joined, and now she is VP. So go you, love it.
Yeah, thank you, sweetheart. Thank you. Trying to change the world, all of that.
All of that, exactly. I was like, myself and Sarah were the first ones of colour, and we're like, yes, let's welcome loads more on it. It's amazing to see.
And you open the door, and now there's a few.
There's more. I'm so happy to see so more. So happy. But anyway, I wanted to obviously tell you about this podcast and what it's about. The idea is that we are giving our flowers to people of colour in the industry that are doing great things, like yourself. So it's more of a kudos to you guys, but also like, let's get into, nitty gritty of what it's like working in the industry. So tell us about yourself and what you do.
So my name is Ngozi Emeagi, and I work at the London Stock Exchange. So I look after the corporate comms for data and analytics. So London Stock Exchange bought a company called Refinitiv in early 2021. And that makes up the data and analytics part of the London Stock Exchange. So that's the area that I kind of focus on. And it's mainly corporate communications.
Okay, cool. And so have you always wanted to work in comms?
No, actually. I feel like my entry to communications was really quite random. So I started off in the operations role at Goldman Sachs. And I think after a few years, I decided that it wasn't really for me. I wanted to kind of move on and try something different. So I spoke to loads of friends in like loads of different industries. And I had a friend who worked in another agency, so a financial communications agency. And she told me about the wonderful world of communications and about what she was doing. So I spoke to quite a few people that worked in agencies and decided that it sounded like something I'd want to get into. So went for a few interviews and found my first role in a financial communications agency.
Oh, that's interesting. So I'm going to say, well, what is it that actually attracted you to comms? Was it the fact that you worked on campaigns? Like, what was it that made you think, oh, this is the way I want to go?
I think it was the mix of loads of different things, actually, to be honest. So it was, I guess, the idea that I would be working with financial services companies. So that was my speciality when I kind of moved into communications. I also liked the idea that I would be working with clients. So I liked that personable part of PR. And I think that's probably been a key thing for me. So the fact that you actually are encouraged to kind of go out and network and build relationships with the media and also with potential clients and that kind of thing. So that really attracted me to the industry. And I think that was probably the key driver for me to kind of move away.
Sounds interesting. That is a good driver as well, because you're just thinking there's so much to do, isn't there? So it makes complete sense. So
the writing, I have to say, the writing piece for me was huge because I absolutely love writing. So that too.
Oh, cool. So did you do writing at uni? Did you do like an English degree or something like that?
Oh my God. Just so you saying that, I wanted to do an English degree, coming from a Nigerian background, coming from, having Nigerian parents. I was proud to do an English degree. They thought it was too fluffy, but that was 100%, which I think is crazy.
That is absolutely crazy.
No, but I wanted to, and that was my favorite subject at school. So,
oh wow,
wasn't allowed to.
Fluffy. I think that is so funny,
right?
Because
I actually thought you could. I ended up doing economics. They actually thought that was fluffy too, because my dad's a doctor, my mum's a lawyer, and so they wanted a professional degree.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I've got a few friends like that, and the aunties are like, no, it's got to be law or you doctor. Okay, and they're like very stringent on that. I'm like, okay, so English is fluffy. I think that is so funny. So, okay, interesting. So lived experiences, I want to touch into this a little bit, right? So what I always ask everyone who comes on is the question about, when did you become aware of your ethnicity? Now, for this, it might sound a strange question for some, but for people of color, it isn't necessarily a strange question because you know the skin you're born into. Like, you know, I know I was born into a Caribbean family, but for me, it became really, really, I became aware of it when I was going to secondary school. And then I heard about a group called Chelsea Smilers who'd go and cut a smile in your face with a razor blade or a knife if you're a brown person, you know, black or brown. So if you're melanated, basically, you were off target. Excuse me. So that was my point going to secondary school, you know, 11 years old, a bit like, whoa, scared, just thinking, quite aware that someone wants to just harm me because of the color of my skin. Yeah. So that was my kind of moment. What about you?
That's a really interesting question, actually. I kind of feel like it probably happened for me a lot later. So I went to a Catholic school, and I think in the school, there were quite a few people of colour. So quite a few Black people, quite a few, you know, other ethnicities there. So it wasn't, I guess my race was never really an issue, just wasn't, you know, it wasn't a thing. And I even think when I first started my first job, it wasn't really a thing. Obviously, as you know, I knew I was Black, obviously,
yeah, of course.
But it wasn't ever, I don't think I ever felt like it was detrimental to me in any way. It was a negative to me in any way. I didn't feel like it held me back in any way, even in my first role. So I was at Goldman Sachs, I mentioned that before, American Bank, where they were probably ahead of the curve when it came to kind of pushing diversity and inclusion and, you know, inclusive workforce and that kind of thing. So they had, you know, a Black comms network, and there were loads of Black people from, you know, in my opinion. So that was great. I think probably the first time I noticed it was when I started in communications, and realizing that it was an industry whereby hardly anyone looked like me. Yeah. And that, I guess, to do well, as I mentioned, it was all about networks. It was all about knowing people. And I guess the people that you had to kind of build these relationships with were people that I had never come across before because of, I guess, where I was from, my education, you know, that kind of thing. And they all did not, none of them had the same upbringing as me. None of them looked like me, as I said. So I think that was probably the first time I really noticed that I was different, and that I was Black. Okay. And I guess in a way whereby I felt like it was a potential barrier to me doing well, I think.
Okay, interesting. And that's interesting that you went so long without it. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. Okay, well, that's great. So have you ever felt like your race or ethnicity has held you back in your career so far?
So I feel like at some points it hasn't given me the opportunities as it's potentially given other people. And I will say, I guess, as I mentioned, kind of coming into communications and maybe not having some of those relationships that other people have, I think I noticed. So, for instance, I know there are a lot of people that worked with me in my first role that kind of knew people who were in the media because they, you know, went to school with them, or it was a friend of a family member, or, you know, things like that. And I didn't have those connections. My family was completely different. As I said, professionals, just kind of, you know, moved in different circles. So I kind of found that in that way, I kind of felt like it was a barrier of some sort. And I also think maybe not having anyone to kind of look up to that looked like me was also quite difficult. When I first started my career. So looking around me and not seeing many people that look like me in senior positions. And I think that can probably have an impact to kind of your psyche and thinking about how far you can get in the industry if nobody that's, you know, senior or has done well actually looks like you. So I think in those ways it's probably been it was probably a barrier, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good point you make. It is so important to see your own likeness and others 100%. That are doing really great. So it helps to inspire you, doesn't it? So
100%. And I don't think I realized that until I kind of moved into this industry, to be honest. I realized how important it was and how important it has been for me throughout my life, actually seeing people who look like me in different areas of my life. So
so important. Good point. Absolutely. So have you ever experienced or witnessed racism in the workplace? And if so, how was it handled?
Have I ever experienced or witnessed racism? I'd say yeah. I guess I'll give you an example that wasn't in the workplace as such, but at a work event.
Okay.
So when I started in insurance, we went to a work event. I think it was an awards ceremony or something like that. And myself and my then boss, who was also Black, were approached by a gentleman who had started up a charity to kind of go into inner city schools to kind of talk to Black kids around, career options and how you progress in the workplace and that kind of thing. So all of these kids, they were in inner city schools. The schools probably weren't the best schools, but
kind of stuff, yeah.
Say that again?
Disadvantaged youth kind
exactly,
of stuff,
exactly. Right? So he approached myself and my boss, and he said, "I would like you to come and speak in these schools," which we were happy about. And he was like, I want you to tell your personal experience about how you managed to thrive from an inner city school and how you managed to kind of make your way through to your current role. And I guess for me, I looked at him and I thought, I guess the intent is great. Like it's amazing that what you're doing. You're trying to go into schools. Exactly. It was the assumption that you look at me and assume that you know my background. You assume you know where I come from and what my story is without me actually telling you.
Yeah.
And so that for me was mind-blowing. And that kind of opened my eyes, I think, to my interactions with people within that industry. Because I was thinking, is this going to be a situation whereby people look at me and they believe that they know who I am before they actually know anything about me?
Yeah.
And I thought that was quite interesting. It was quite interesting
interaction. That is an interesting one. Did you end up pushing back on the whole inner city school thing and say, well, actually, I
did.
Went to school. Yeah, absolutely.
I did.
Reprogram his mind. Because that happens.
100%.
I feel like people make snap decisions just like that. And they'll look at you and think, oh, okay, she must be from a hard background. Potentially single parent, potentially this and that, they just start rewriting your story. You're like, well, hang on, that's not me.
I have not had a conversation to you about who I am, so please wait until I do.
Yeah, exactly. But that's an interesting example.
Yeah.
Interesting, and that was subtle, really subtle with the racism, right? Because the example that I always use is when I used to work for the General Medical Council. I used to work in their press office. And I remember getting a call from a doctor. I was helping him out with some stuff. And then at the end, he was like, oh, what's your name? I said, oh, yes, Ebony. Ebony, are you coloured? And I was like, whoa, no, I'm Black. Do you know what I mean? So I was taken aback. And his response was, my God, you sound so professional. So again, because you sound well-spoken, you cannot be a person of colour. So it's those sort of, blatant racisms, and in your case, the kind of microaggression that he had in that assumption that he made. So it's fascinating.
And it's always trying to compliment you and with racism.
With racism.
Exactly.
Yeah. It was like, you're trying to say I sound really good. It's like, oh, but with racism. So it's like, and with no racism. So it's like coloured. I was like, no, that's a term that really drives me mad. So I'm like, I am not purple or green, So yeah. Absolutely.
I'm Black, and it's okay to say.
It's okay to say. Also, I prefer if he said, are you melanated? That would never come out of his mouth. I would like that. But yeah, it's one of those things. So again, obviously that was time that you experienced it, you could say, and obviously you handled it yourself because clearly, you were able to kind of push back, right? Yeah, exactly. So has there ever been a time where you wish you spoke up about something, or a time when you did speak up and maybe self-advocate or advocate for someone else?
So I think probably an example would be in a company that I've worked for, where there was an individual talking about Asian people.
Okay.
In a very derogatory way.
Okay.
And she's just quite a senior person.
Right.
And obviously making comments where she kind of wanted validation from the people around her.
Right.
And obviously I was there, and being very junior, didn't say anything.
Yeah, of course. You would have felt a bit uncomfortable, right?
Exactly. Just kind of, didn't laugh or didn't go along with it, but it was very, I didn't say anything.
Yeah.
And I kind of look back in that situation, I feel like agencies took a while to kind of come to understand how important it was to embrace diversity and inclusion and to embrace that agenda.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like I wish I had been more vocal just around helping them to understand that even though there is no Indian person within this room, you can't talk about different races like that, right?
Yeah.
Well, generally ever,
Yeah.
but definitely in front of, other people of color.
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like I wish I'd been a lot more confident in my youth and kind of tried to push that a lot earlier. And I think I did, I have done in recent years.
Yeah.
And I think that obviously starting out in your first role is quite a difficult thing.
That's going to be daunting. Yeah, and absolutely. Exactly. It's not necessarily your position either to have to police people. And I think that's one thing that I like to make the point of. For people of colour, we are born in the skin we're in. It's not our jobs to actually teach people how to not be racist. But obviously, when we see things that are wrong, we can speak up if we feel comfortable. But again, in that situation, it's completely understandable. You wouldn't want to say anything in that situation, but it would stick with you as a moment of, oh my goodness, can you believe he said that or he said that?
100%. And I think probably an example that I'd probably give in more recent time was after the Black Lives Matter movement. So I was at an organisation. I was really keen to kind of say something about it. On social media, publicly, on behalf of the organisation, just to say that, we support Black people, we support the Black people of our organisation, that kind of thing. And there was real pushback. There was real pushback about being public and being so
vocal about it,
supportive and being so vocal. At a time when actually a lot of companies were being quite vocal, I thought. So I guess it was, for me, it was a safe space because, a lot of companies were doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, I kind of had a rant about it for a moment, then kind of moved on, but definitely wish it was something that I had pushed and I had made sure we kind of did, because I look back on that now and I think it's probably something I shouldn't have let go. Or I should have had concrete reasons as to why it wasn't possible.
Well, actually, you should just have support. Really?
Yeah.
You should have support. You should have had to have pushed back on this sort of issue because, everyone was jumping on that bandwagon. It got to the point where I thought, oh my God, if I see another black square, you guys better make some difference in your actual policies. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
Putting a black square up, make sure it filters through. But at least they were trying, other than just being mute on it. So I feel like you had the right intentions. So don't knock yourself on that one. That was their missed opportunity. You did bring it to them. So, it is what it is. But I wanted to move on to code switching, right? Because I think this is interesting. I feel like we all code switch. I'm sure, you've got your white counterparts, they might code switch as well. But I'm speaking of it from a Black perspective. And I know that we code switch sometimes in different areas, right? Which is fine. Yeah. But the question is, do you feel we can actually lead with our authentic voices in the workplace?
Oh, that's such an interesting question because I still feel like I'm code switching. But what I will say is that I feel like I do it a lot less often. And I will say that I have found a way to be authentic while still code switching, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. It does.
So, sorry, remind me what your question was again.
The question was, I feel like we can lead with our authentic voice in the workplace.
Okay.
Basically code switching, essentially.
Okay, so I do think we can actually. So I think it took me a while to learn that. And I think that it has been, I guess, through my experiences with different organizations, but also in coming into contact with certain mentors who have really opened my eyes about how to succeed in the workplace. I honestly think the only way that you can be happy and succeed and do really well is to be your authentic self. I don't think you can be anything else. You're in the workplace for such a long period of the day. If you're constantly code switching, if you're constantly, holding back, then I think it's really detrimental to your mental health. And I don't think it benefits any of you or anybody. But what I would say is, I guess, understand how. What I have done, I guess, in recent years is kind of understand how to engage and how to connect with people on levels that make sense to me.
Yeah.
And so I guess when I go into an environment, if everyone's talking about football and that's not my thing, or if everyone's, talking about certain things that I don't have a connection with, I'm not going to try and meet you where you are. I'm not going to try and kind of connect on that level with you.
Yeah.
What I will do is try and find something that we both share, and try and connect on that level.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I've done more of that in recent years. And I feel like that has really worked for me.
Yeah.
I can only be myself, in situations, but I feel like I'm trying to kind of meet you where I am, and trying to kind of build a connection with you based on the things that I know and that, are true of me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's great advice as well, actually. It is about building a connection back where you are, because you do feel like that sometimes, depending on the work environment you're in and how nurturing it is and whether you can really be your authentic self. I still believe that we're going to have an element of code switching. I just think that's just natural. But ultimately you want to get to the point where you can relate with people on a level that you can relate to them with. And then you made the point, really, really perfectly. You articulated it well. So I agree with you on that. So the next question I have for you is about becoming aware of the color bias in PR and comms. Like, when did you become aware? Is it as soon as you kind of entered the industry, or was it because when you started networking a bit more? Like for me, it was when I started doing more networking. And, for example, went to even join Women in PR, because I was like, wow, it's a sea of white women. And I just wasn't expecting it to be that much. Obviously, I knew the stats, because I had always been like in-house or working with my own clients. You don't always see the optics until you're in an environment like that.
So for me, it was definitely when I first came into the industry. I guess, as I said, I was working at Goldman's beforehand, and there was a lot of Black people. There was a lot of Black people. And so it wasn't, it was never a thing whereby I thought I was the only.
Right.
So for me, it was just like, it was quite, I was quite used to working with a lot of people who look like me.
Right.
I come into communications and I'm like, oh, literally nobody looks like me here. This is very, very strange. And I guess it wasn't just my organization, because in my head I was thinking, well, it's a small organization. Maybe it's the fact that it's a small organization, and if I look outside, then I will potentially find people who look like me, and and I'll find the diversity there.
Right.
But I guess for me, it was everything. It was, within my organization, it was the media, it was other agencies, it was in-house, I feel like there was limited diversity, and it's definitely gone a lot better now. I do feel like I can find, there are quite a few of us now, I would say. Obviously not as many as there should be or there needs to be, but I think there are more of us. But I'd say as soon as I came to the industry, it was probably one of my first realizations that there was not a lot of diversity.
Wow.
So,
interesting though, but it's because yours was almost straight away. So yeah, absolutely. You're met with it like a bit more stark for you, I take it.
Yeah, 100%.
What are your thoughts on allyship, and what does it mean for you? And like, what to you is a good example of allyship? Because I feel like, there's lots of talk around what allies look like and who's a good ally. So what does it mean for you?
So I think allyship is important, definitely. But I think that people have to do more than just talk. I think it has to be action. And I guess the best example of allyship that I know, that I have personally experienced, is probably an agency I worked for. And the CEO of the agency was fantastic. I thought he was wonderful. He's an Irish guy, pretty obvious who it is since it was my last agency. But I thought he was a great example of what I think allyship should be, because as I said, I guess when I first joined the agency, when I first joined communications, I think one of the things I noticed was that the networks were close to me because I didn't go to certain schools, or I didn't have family connections or that kind of thing. And what I will say about this particular individual is that he was very good at opening his networks to other people. So, and it wasn't just for me, I saw him do it, to other people within the organization, but he would invite you to things. He would introduce you to people. He was very active at doing that. Right. And I think that for me was really key, and it really stuck in my mind, because I thought you can talk about supporting people and supporting a group of people all you like, but ultimately, what are the particular issues that these group of people that you're supporting, what are the particular issues that they face, and how can you help them with those issues? And for me, that was huge, because networks is an issue. And if you are being active about opening your networks to people, then that is a barrier that completely, you know, that gets broken down by just a very simple action. Absolutely. And so, yeah, as I said, stuck in my head. I think he's great. I will sing his praises. You know, all
that's brilliant though. That he makes a conscious effort to do that. So that's brilliant. You know, and he's helping to forge those networks. So that, I like that. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. So another question I have for you, Ngozi, is about, you know, what actually motivates or inspires you to keep going at the moment?
So I would say it would be certain family members. So I'd say my motivations are definitely my children. I've got 2 girls.
Yeah.
And for me, I want to be a role model, and I want them to see success. And I want them to see success within a family, within a home, and I want them to see success within a workplace. And so I think making sure that I am a role model to them keeps me on the days that I guess I'm like, oh God, I'm so tired, I can't continue. I think those are the days that I definitely just kind of keep pushing through, because I need them to see an example. And I guess it's back to our talking about representation. I don't know what my kids are going to do. They could do anything, you know, it's fine by me. But I think for them to see a woman who has had children, who is Black, who has succeeded, who has done really well, is really important to me. Because I want them to know what the possibilities are. You know, I want them to know that, you know, if they work hard, that they can achieve anything. Absolutely. And so that definitely motivates me. And I think what inspires me is my mother, because she has been that role model to me. I think she had 4 children, you know, came here from Nigeria where she studied law, had to kind of redo her law degree when she came to the UK, opened up her own law firm and was just killing it, and then came back and used to cook for us. And we used to have, like, you know, home cooked meals every night, and there were 4 of us. It was just, you know, it was a very busy household, but I kind of feel like she was also one of those mums who was also always present. So now I look back and I think, how did she manage to do that? I've only got 2 kids and I still feel like it's a challenge, like, every single day. But my mum knew everything that was going on in everybody's life. She was always at you, you know.
That's amazing.
But yet she had such a successful career. So I think that for me is inspiring, and I really want to kind of make her proud too. So yeah, I'd say
that's lovely. Thanks for sharing that. I think that's lovely. I think it's nice when your children motivate you. I think that's so important. You know, mother to mother. I get that completely. So, what did you find most challenging so far on your journey?
On my career journey. So, what would I say was most challenging so far? I would actually say the representation thing for me was huge, actually. So I would say coming into comms and feeling like a complete outsider, and feeling like not being 100% sure that there was a role for me in 10 years, because I didn't see anybody else in the industry that had done it and that had succeeded. So the representation issue, really, I think that was the first, and because it was the first time, and I was a few years into my career at that point, I think it was a stark, that was for me, and how important that was for me to be able to kind of be motivated within the industry. Because I think once I did find people who were, and obviously there still aren't many, but once I did find people who were doing well, and who did look like me, it kind of put a different mindset in the whole career progression. I was like, it's possible, I can do it, you know. So I found that really challenging, actually. I
can understand that.
No, definitely.
No, it makes sense. I can completely get that. And then moving it into the sort of the employer realm, you know, as a person of color, a Black woman in the industry, what is it that you want from your employer? And for you, what makes a good working environment?
Oh, interesting. What do I want from my employer? I guess I want my employer to really see me I guess the skills that I bring to the table. So I think understanding who I am, understanding what my skills are, and therefore what opportunities would be good for me, I think is great. Because I kind of feel like sometimes when you're in an organization, when you're in a role, it's all about that role and how you do that role well. But for me, what I would love for my employer to kind of do is think about me as I guess, as a product, and how not only can I do that role well, what are the other things within the organization that I can also do well? So, stretch products and getting involved in, diversity and inclusion, or getting involved in, different areas of the business, I think, where possible, I think would be great. So what was your second question?
So the second question was more about, was what do you want from your employer and what makes a good working environment?
What makes a good working environment?
I say that because of the fact that there's all this drive about, diversity, equity, inclusion, which is great. But, for me, retention is a key factor. And so there could be things that employers could be missing. I feel like some people just have policies, but, if you just have a policy and you don't actually change your behavior or your culture, you're not going to retain anybody.
Yeah, no, I see that. I guess treating people like adults is huge for me. So flexibility is huge. Yeah. So understanding that you employ people for a reason, you employ people that you should trust and that you should know are capable to do a role. Yeah. So I guess therefore, if someone needs to kind of go off and pick up a child or do something outside work, I think that should be supported, and
absolutely,
I guess people's other areas of interest or other responsibilities should be acknowledged and should be supported. So I guess being treated like an adult. I always find that when companies are quite flexible in that way, they retain staff a lot more, I think.
Absolutely agree with you.
So I think that's a huge point. And I guess like talking, not just talking the talk, but walking the walk, right? I think that everyone kind of hops on about diversity and inclusion now. I think all organizations do. But I think that there has to be some obvious and tangible things that companies are doing to kind of retain diverse staff and to recruit diverse staff. And I think that I would love to see I love to see that when I'm in organisations. I think that is really important. So, for instance, at LSEG, they have a training programme that is dedicated to ethnic minorities. I love that.
Brilliant. I love that.
Exactly. That
really helps to create the equity part, the fairness part, because, you don't always have the access to these things. So, very 100%. Important. Yeah. So, now I appreciate you sharing that as well. And I agree. One thing, I detest micromanagement, and I feel like you need to empower your staff.
100%.
And, trust your staff. They are qualified adults, so we need to let them understand that. So those sort of things are my bugbear. Absolutely.
Definitely.
And then huge. I suppose lastly around that is, what does diversity, equity, inclusion look like to you? I suppose it's a simple question, but what does it look like to you? And I suppose you just gave an example where you've got your company that are actually have training that is specifically for people of colour. Amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. But what I would say is that I think that diversity and inclusion means different things to me at different points, I think. So I think at this point now, because we're in a situation whereby we are, trying to improve the levels, we are trying to improve diversity within organisations. I think that things like training programmes for ethnic minorities is great. It's wonderful. I think it's something that we need at this point. What I would love to see in I don't know whether I'm being optimistic by saying 20 years, but what I would love to see is all of, these programs and, diversity inclusion roles for all of those to just not be needed. To just be, we are living in a world whereby we actually, we
don't need it.
Exactly.
I know.
It is just a fair organisation. Yeah. I mean, that is like the dream, isn't it?
It is. Absolutely. Absolutely. Just like no more having to talk about this anymore, because actually everything is as it should be. But
it's just, a natural thing. And I hope that by the time my kids are are working, that is what, I mean, if I talk to them about diversity and inclusion programs and things like that, I hope they're like, what? Like,
by then,
that? Like,
what
that's
is
crazy.
That?
Exactly.
Old school.
Exactly. Like, it's so old school, Mum. Like, I really hope that is what they are saying to me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that would be a perfect world, wouldn't it?
That would be perfect. That would be. But I'm going to move you into your proudest moments now. So can you tell us about one of your proudest moments? It can be work, could be personal, could just be a highlight of your career,
Oh, gosh. I need to have a think. One of my proudest moments.
I know your kids are definitely one of your proudest moments.
They are. They're wonderful. They're great. They're definitely one of my proudest moments. A moment, I'm not sure that this is my proudest moment. I'm just trying to think of, off
it
head.
could be just a career highlight, if you like, just a highlight that you're proud of.
Yeah, I think something that I'm proud of is introducing one of my old workplaces to SEO. So it is a recruitment agency that is specifically focused on Black talent. So ethnic minorities, but also Black talent, and they kind of look at they kind of help university students kind of gain good roles when they come out. So help with training, help with interview prep, that kind of thing.
Oh, cool.
And I brought them into one of my other organizations. So for me, that was great because it was like they at the time didn't have any visibility to these kind of agencies, didn't know these kind of agencies existed. And it was a way, I guess, to try and help improve the numbers of ethnic minorities that are coming into the organization. So for me, that was really key. And I love the fact that they kind of took it on board and they kind of ran with it, and they were really keen to kind of get involved in the programs. That was good. That was huge.
Brilliant. Yeah, that is a real thing to be proud of. That's nice. Yeah. That's really nice. Okay, so I wanted to ask you your thoughts about the industry now. So what do you think about how the industry will evolve over the next kind of few years? What are your thoughts?
What are my thoughts?
You just mentioned about diversity, so I thought that was important.
Well, what I will say, if we're looking at this from like if we're looking at this from a gender lens, I think that COVID personally, and from some of the people that I have spoken to, COVID has made it an impact, and I think that has helped a lot of women, especially women, I would say within agencies, be able to continue to do their roles. Yeah. And I think that hopefully that will continue, and that will mean that a lot more women can kind of go through that agency path. And get really senior, even though they have kids and they have childcare responsibilities and that kind of thing. So I think that it's massively helped in terms of flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of not having, I guess, that FaceTime that was really prevalent, before COVID. Yeah. So people don't have to, they're not chained to their desk till like 6-7 o'clock in the, and personally it's completely changed my life. I'm way more involved in what my kids are doing. I can do pick up, I can do drop off, I can do that kind of thing. So I think
it's so important for your mental health as a parent as well, because otherwise you have nothing but guilty pangs of I'm missing this, and I used to hate missing recitals or things like that. You have to shift things around. So
now you don't have to. So I definitely think in that sense, I hope that it kind of continues down that path and only gets better for
I think there's no excuse at this point. I feel like companies that are using the excuse just need to get with the program, because COVID showed that you can really get along with work remotely, and you don't have to change your desk, and we should be working a bit more flexibly, so people who are happy at home can be happy at work as well. That balance is 100%. So important. Yeah,
100%. And I'm glad that it was something that, obviously we had to do it when we were in 2020. It was something we had no choice. We had no choice but to do it. But I think that it was a great thing. Because it did prove that it can be done. So
exactly.
Yeah, that was huge.
So no more excuses. We worked for how long?
Exactly. And nothing went to shit. It was all good.
exactly. Which is a bonus.
Exactly.
So that's all good, isn't it? So, as you've been in the industry for a while, I want to ask, what would you say are the key lessons you've learned throughout your career thus far? Because you're still on your career journey.
I'm still on my career journey.
What lessons would you say? Maybe there's a couple of key lessons you've learned.
think representation matters.
Yes.
That's huge for me.
Yeah.
Actually seeing people within, seeing people that look like you in senior roles, it matters. It's very important. I think organizations should understand that. It's very important.
I agree.
Allyship has to be more than just words.
Absolutely agree with you on that.
Action is key, and deliberate action, understanding what the problem is and understanding how you can be a solution, I think is really important.
Absolutely.
Those
are some great ones. Those are some good ones. Very good ones.
Yeah.
Definitely. And then I suppose my next question would be for you about advice to young people coming in. So what advice would you give to young people, people of colour in particular, that are considering entering the industry?
Yeah. I'd say be careful about the whole code switching thing. As you say, I think there's probably always going to be an element of it, but don't let that detract from who you are. I think being your authentic self is your superpower.
Yeah.
I think that no one is you, and there has to be specific things that only you can bring to an organisation, and you'll only be able to do that if you are true to who you are. Yeah. So I think that is key. Be confident, because I think that you're hired because of who you are. And I think sometimes when you are the only, and I've been in this experience, before in my career, there is an element of kind of wanting to blend in, and so we diminish ourselves in some way, or we just try and kind of be the norm and fit into the norm. And I think that, as I said, being your authentic self is your superpower, and I think people should always have that in their head, be true to who they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice. And on to mindset before we start wrapping things up. So to me, mindset is so important throughout your whole trajectory of your life. And one of the key questions I like to ask people is, how do you actually deal with the internal mindset war? Sometimes you have how do you manage your own self-limiting beliefs? Because honestly, if you're having a conversation with yourself, usually, and your inner voice is telling you some negative stuff, like you can't do it, or you're not good enough, or, that's where imposter syndrome can come from. So how do you manage kind of self-limiting beliefs and that sort of internal mindset?
That's a really good question, because I feel like I'm constantly battling that. Like literally,
I think we all are. I think day we all are.
Constantly battling. But what I do say is that I try and make it tangible. So I try and make specific goals for myself that I can achieve, or that I want to achieve. And I think that, like, regardless of that voice in your head that's like, oh, you can't do it, or you're not good enough. I think if I have tangible things that I say, well, look, at the beginning of the year, I said that I wanted to do all of this, and I've done all of this, then I think that gives me the confidence to kind of keep going, if that makes sense. Absolutely. So I just try and make it as tangible as possible.
Yeah.
So that it's not about, oh, am I not? I kind of give myself the proof points.
Yeah.
So, I've done all of this.
Absolutely.
So I am good enough.
So you are who you say you are. Exactly. I kind of do that. You've got to kind of, be your own cheerleader.
Exactly.
You have to learn to be your own cheerleader.
100%.
And that's not as easy. Sometimes it just takes a bit more, but what you said is spot on. Absolutely. And then looking back on your journey, Ngozi, would you do it all over again?
Would I do it all over again? Yes, I would definitely do it all over again. I've met some people that have really changed my life throughout my career, I have to say. And I'm so grateful for the journey that I've been on. I guess not coming into comms straight from university, having that period whereby I worked in a different industry, then came into it, which has made me very grateful for the industry, because I really do like it.
Yeah.
But then also just meeting people who have given me just have been so inspiring to me within my career. I just think I've met the most wonderful people during my career in comms. So I'm
that's brilliant.
very, very grateful for the people that I've met.
Oh, great.
So I would. The answer is yes.
And I've come up to my last two. So this one I like, because it depends on what you get. So what's the best and worst advice you've been given?
Oh, gosh. I think the best advice is about being my authentic self. I've been given that advice by one particular individual who has been probably the biggest influence for me in a positive way in this industry. But she said to me, don't try and change who you are. whenever you're in an organization, whenever you're in a situation, don't try and change who you are. Always be yourself. So I think that's been the best advice. The worst advice. Again, this person will remain nameless.
Yeah, of course.
But the worst advice I've probably given is that you have to be a bitch to succeed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And I think probably, I feel like that's not generally my nature, but probably I did believe that initially at the beginning of my career, that you had to be a horrible person in order to do well.
Yeah.
I think maybe in some environments, in some organizations, that might be true. I don't know. But I kind of feel like, actually, no, I don't think that's ever true. I think that you can always, you don't, I think being assertive is a good thing.
Yes.
Pushing back when you need to push back is a good thing, but I think that you don't need to step on people to do well.
No, absolutely not. I agree with you.
And so that's definitely been the worst advice
Interesting advice.
I'm glad I kind of
you park that to the side, yeah.
I'm like, I'll park that.
Yeah. Noted, but I won't be moving.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, maybe that's how they got there. Maybe that's how they felt they needed to be to get there. But like you said, if we're living our authentic self, then you don't need to be that kind of person, do you?
Exactly.
Good point. So lastly, do you have any rules that you have implemented along your career journey, that you used to kind of help you, that you could pass on to others?
Rules.
Like one of mine used to be, before I started working for myself, one of mine was always, if you cannot get promoted within, then you go out and get promoted. Yeah. So don't let that stop your journey, because sometimes during a company, it's very comfortable, but actually there's no career progression, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't progress. Yeah. Sometimes you have to step out, or sometimes you're in an organization and you are passed over for progression. That's your kind of your inclination to say, okay, maybe I should look elsewhere, but don't let it stop your journey. That's one of the things that I try and live by.
Yeah, I think, and I've definitely followed that as well. I've moved around a couple of times because of different reasons, but sometimes that reason. So yeah, I would definitely say that. Don't keep it moving, because you don't want to be stagnant because people don't recognize your
talent. Absolutely.
Your talent. Exactly. So I definitely say that was a key one. And also just don't get bored. For me personally, the idea of being comfortable, like completely comfortable in a role, makes me that doesn't motivate me. Yeah. And so I want to be stretched. I want days where I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to try and figure it out. And so I think when a role starts to get too comfortable for me, I think it's time to think about what else I can do, what else I can bring in, how I can expand it. So that for me is also a huge thing.
No, I think you're quite right. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ngozi. It's been amazing speaking to you.
Oh,
thank you for sharing your lived experiences with us on the podcast.
Pleasure.
Right. So for those who are interested in connecting with Ngozi, where can they find you? Let people know.
On LinkedIn. Do you want me to give details? So just, I guess, my name. So Ngozi Emeagi.
There you go. Look up on LinkedIn. You can link in with her there. So thank you so much for joining us. This has been Gems in Comms podcast with lovely Ngozi Emeagi. And I have been Ebony Girl, your host for today. I will be back with some more wonderful guests from Comms. So stay tuned and see you soon.